Good evening, everyone. I'm Mary Conley-Eggert, founder of Global Waterworks, and I'm actually here to host the Lake Lover meeting, but to turn it over to our chairs here in a moment. I just wanted you all to know that you're part of something much larger, a community of 2,800 people across the globe, and this 90-second overview will give you a sense of what you can experience in the community.
The water sector is growing and getting smarter. Yet the challenges it is facing are also becoming more frequent. Aging infrastructure, emerging contaminants, floods, and drought impact water security, affordability, availability, and sustainability. As challenges appear to be increasing, innovation is also increasing, enabling those in search of solutions to find answers. Staying current could seem impossible unless you have a mighty network like Global Waterworks. This charitable organization is committing to solving the global water crisis in this generation, and it has provided a user-friendly interface to connect the people, processes, and technologies who are already making water work. Browse by topics, groups, or journeys. Search the global calendar and use location settings to find members near you wherever you travel. Check out the Growing Water Tech Showcase, where you will find proven solutions accompanied by case studies. To date, we've connected 2,300 water professionals and educators across more than 90 countries. Now, social media is not for everyone, but if you care about solving the global water crisis, you'll want to dive right in and get more done faster. Help us connect drops of interest for waves of impact and start to tap a world of water experts at your fingertips. globalwaterworks.org.
Well, that is the platform that you get to tap after this program so that we stay connected. But the reason we're here today is to figure out how we plan for success in this year of Lake County Lake Lovers. And I'm thrilled to have Becky Saul, who's the co-chair, and coming to us from AbbVie most recently. She shared a beautiful success story on her Spark Innovation Incubator. Bill Cody, who is also a co-chair and was here from the start, providing background on the comprehensive plan for Libertyville last year, and Alana Bartolai, who is with our Lake County Health Department and always a resource leading the ecological services for the county, who will share the program. Before we begin, I just wanted you to know why we're here. Our agenda will cover, what you can expect from Lake Lovers, Alana's presentation, a Q&A, and then we want to make sure you mark your calendars for next steps. The Illinois Lake Management Association meeting is March 4th and 6th, and our next Lake County Lake Lovers is the third Thursday of March, and you can mark every third Thursday. So look forward to your joining us for a World Water Day feature then. And what we are all aware of is that sometimes we're experiencing lake closures, the water's murky, E. coli, or incidents of algae require us to monitor and sometimes close our lakes, and we'd like to see them in complete health. And that's what each of you is representing, a lake or an area, and has shared your passion and interest for improving lakes. So what you can expect from Lake County Lake Lovers is that this will be our focus for the third Thursday every month. And we're going to use data, and we have side groups that are working to corral this data. And we're pleased to say that the community has grown about 25% since we announced the plans for Lake County Lake Lovers. And you all have a role to play, as you'll see in our go forward. And I'm admitting Lisa Wolford, who is a great resource, and want to welcome also Jim Heinen, who just came in from St. Mary's, where we have a tremendous success story. So I'm clicking through and not seeing this advance. Just a second. I think what I'll do is turn it over to our fearless leaders. Becky, if you could share plans for the community, and then turn it over to Bill for introductions and our presentation. That would be super.
Thank you so much, Mary, and good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for making this time in your busy lives to say that you're going to show up tonight and you're going to roll up your sleeves and you're curious and you're hopeful. I came from an opportunity where I led volunteers within the confines of AbbVie, 50,000 plus global large corporation that makes medicine, and inspired them to, on top of their jobs, participate in an opportunity to accelerate the company reaching their public environmental sustainability goals, including reducing water use. So how might we take those lessons learned and apply them to this rich community? So you have choices. One is coming every third Thursday. Two is exploring this mighty network that Mary has hinted at. She's an expert resource. Reach out to her afterwards if you want to learn more or take advantage or have your hand held to explore it, to find what you need. And third, we are inviting some colleagues, some friends to get together in a few weeks to really set a strategic action plan that we then will make visible in the platform with monthly goals. And perhaps there'll be a few minutes at each of these third Thursdays to report the progress. It's by setting a vision, breaking it down into small chunks, recruiting people that care to take action, and then holding ourselves accountable. So that's what we're excited to get in motion, so that as we look ahead to the end of 2024, we hopefully will have some powerful stories of movement and change. Back to you, Mary.
Yeah, I'm going to throw it back to Bill, who's introducing our speaker in the program tonight.
Excellent. Take it away, Bill.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Becky. Thank you, everyone, for coming in tonight on a busy night here. And I'm very pleased to present Alana, who will be giving us a presentation on lake management. So just fasten your seatbelts. It's like the ninth inning of a Cub game. She's got some very exciting information for us. So Alana, thank you so much for taking the time out tonight. And please take it away.
Awesome. I'm going to share my screen here, so give me 1 minute while I get that set up.
We have an
Okay. And please let me know that that is being shared correctly, Mary.
Great.
Awesome. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name's Alana Bartolai. I'm the Ecological Services Program Coordinator with Lake County Health Department. I'm going to talk about a few things today. So I'm going to go briefly over what we do at Ecological Services, so you guys kind of know what services we have available, a little bit how we determine water quality on lakes, and then what is lake management planning and what's its importance, and then a brief thing on the role of citizen scientist. So going to touch on a wide array of topics, so kind of stay tuned and I'm here to answer any questions after. So one of the main things we do are limnology studies. To date, since 2000, we have monitored 173 lakes in the county at least once. We typically do them on a rotational basis. And we have lake reports on our website with all our results, and you can check those out on the Lake County Health Department Lake Report website. And in these reports, we're looking at like nutrients, we do aquatic macrophyte surveys, we do shoreline assessments, and we're also looking at water quality trends over time. Some of the other stuff we do are beach safety and monitoring. So we monitor all the beaches, all the licensed beaches in Lake County. And so those include about 11 Lake Michigan beaches and about 80 inland beaches. And we're doing this to prevent illnesses associated with swimming at these beaches. And we also will do safety inspections. So like all beaches need to have certain safety features on there. So that's part of our routine monitoring while we're out there in the summer. We do a lot of aquatic plant surveys. So as you can see, we have a different setup for this. We use a grid system. Many other states do a similar setup to this, but we have a grid system that we create in maps in ArcGIS. And then what that means is we have little points about 60 meters spread apart. You can kind of see that small graph. And we go to each of those points on the lake. So sometimes that's over 200 points on one lake, depending on the size. Some smaller lakes will only have, maybe 30 or 40. And what we're doing is we're measuring the overall density of plants at each of those points, and then we're quantifying and identifying each species presence. So with this, we can make a floristic quality index, which is how diverse are our lakes in terms of their plant life. Part of this plant survey is also identifying invasive species. So we really are keeping an eye on the invasives in our county. So we're able to identify what plant species we're seeing. And then we keep a good track of our native plant species because that goes into the floristic quality index I was talking about. The images here, the top two are the common kind of invasive species we see in most of our lakes. So that's curly-leaf pondweed on the left. And then the top right is Eurasian water milfoil. Many of you guys have these issues on your lake, and I know you're dealing with them. And then the bottom one is hydrilla. We don't really have a problem with hydrilla up here. It's really common in the southeast part of the United States. So like Florida has a huge problem with it. And we're kind of on the watch out for it. We did find it in a detention pond in Lake County, actually in Libertyville back in 2019, but it was contained and it was managed since then. It's typically an aquarium release plant. We do some work with de-icing and chloride. So typically this time of year, we have a lot of snow on the ground and we're putting a lot of road salt out. And so we're monitoring all those chlorides in our environment. And then we put on some workshops each year, and that's our annual de-icing workshops. And that's geared towards municipalities and anyone who's putting down the salt on our roadways and parking lots and what best management practices they can do. And this is a huge collaborative effort with other Lake County agencies. And then since COVID, we've started going virtual and we've collaborated with other Northeast Illinois regions, different counties, as well as different watershed work groups, both in Lake County as well as outside. A lot of people don't realize we also, Ecological does a little bit more than water quality. We also do vector surveillance. So that's looking at like mosquito and tick populations. So we actually monitor the mosquito and tick populations in Lake County, particularly looking at like Lyme disease and West Nile virus. So a little different than what we're talking about today, but one of our services. And we do a lot of outreach efforts. So we host annual workshops. We typically have a aquatic plant identification workshop almost every other year. We do a bunch of presentations to the community and we create a lot of resources. And I'm going to go over the lake management planning resources that we have available. And we're really a technical resource. This can be for other government agencies, municipalities, homeowner associations. They can come to us and ask us questions. And that's a big role of ours, as well as investigating different illicit discharge complaints. So how do we determine water quality? We do all that monitoring. Now, how do we determine the water quality? So we're looking at our water chemistry. We're looking at E. coli for beach closures. We're using that floristic quality index. We're looking at our native species versus invasive, trophic states. The Illinois EPA has impairment statuses. We're looking at that. Threatened and endangered species and fish surveys. So it's not just one thing that determines water quality. It's a whole bunch of stuff. And we use all that to kind of determine what's the status of a lake. So most of the lakes, unfortunately, in Lake County are impaired based off the Illinois EPA impairment levels. And typically a lot of these are due to phosphorus levels. So I always like to point out that the Illinois EPA impairment level is 0.05 milligrams per liter. And the average phosphorus level for Lake County lakes is 0.067. So it's above that impairment status. So on average, most of our lakes are above the impairment status. And how are our lakes? Well, it depends on what question you're asking. So when people ask about water quality, it also depends on what are you looking at. Are you looking at a healthy fish habitat? Are you looking at water chemistry parameters? Are you looking at, the floristic quality index? There's a number of things, and I kind of mentioned a bunch of the stuff we use to determine water quality. So one thing I wanted to note was every year we do have some rankings, and I don't love that term rankings, ranking lakes, but we do put some rankings out and they are based on a number of things. So one is the floristic quality index. So that's the diversity, right, of plant life. And we update these values every year based off the lakes that we do each summer. So maybe we're only monitoring 8 lakes each summer. We'll update those values, but we put the list out for all of our lakes in Lake County. We also have some rankings based off of total phosphorus as well as SecuDisc, which is your water clarity. And I wanted to kind of see, I know it's hard in some of these graphs and it's just kind of words, but a lot of the lakes are the same in all of these rankings. So whether that's the floristic quality index, the phosphorus levels or the how clear the water is, the same lakes are appearing in that top 10. And so do these lakes have anything in common? Yes, they do. So it also depends on what type of lake you have. So lakes can be formed in different ways. So we have our glacial lakes, we have our impoundment lakes that are man-made lakes. They're typically shallower and have higher nutrient levels to begin with. Lake County also has a very nutrient-rich history in our sediment, so that's contributing to a lot of issues. So where does my lake fit in? If you have a lake, where does it fit in? And so I kind of have this graph, and it's very basic, but I broke it up into the 3 of the different type of lakes that we see. So our glacial lakes, our like gravel pit, borrow pit lakes, and then our impoundment lakes. And this is based off of water clarity. And so you can see the larger the water clarity is, that's how clear your lake is. It's a visual thing. And then typically that correlates to total phosphorus. So you can see your borrow pits and glacial lakes just naturally are going to have clearer waters than your impoundment lakes. So if you are a more shallow lake to begin with, you have to kind of put your expectations on what your lake can be and how clear it can get. So it's always important to kind of determine where you're at and what is possible with your lake and to put it into perspective. I'm going to kind of turn over into lake management plans now, but all that water quality data we're talking about will kind of build into your lake management planning process. So what is lake management planning? It's basically a document that's going to guide your lake management decisions. And it encourages partnerships between everyone who utilizes the lake. So it could be concerned citizens, specialized interest groups, anyone who's recreating on it, homeowners. You want to get everyone involved who has a say on the management of the lake. And it identifies the different concerns you're seeing, and it sets realistic goals. And I have that in red because kind of what just mentioned, you have to have a realistic goal to be able to achieve it. And so it's important to have that perspective of where you are and what you can become. And what's really important is these plans are fluid, so they can change over your time. Your water quality can change over time, and your concerns can change over time as well. So it's a document, but it can be changed, and that's okay. And the goal is that this document will help make your lake management decisions easier, and it will provide direction for the limited time and resources everyone has. And when we talk about lake management planning, there are kind of the basic steps that go into it. So the first part is identifying your stakeholders. The second is gathering all the information that's out there so you can identify your concerns. The next is going over developing goals and actions and objectives. And your actions and objectives are what's going to help you reach those goals that you set. And you're going to evaluate the different solutions that are out there to help you achieve this. And there's a whole bunch out there. And then you're going to take action on it. And what's really important is to monitor and evaluate. If you're not monitoring and evaluating after you take action, how do you know it's working? And how do you know if you need to change something up? And then you can reassess and modify. Like I mentioned, it's fluid. We can change it up at any time. So with the gathering information step, the purpose here is just to learn as much possible about your lake. It could also be a good point to identify any gaps or missing data you have. Some lakes have a lot more resources, a lot more data out there than others. So, maybe you're not able to find so much. That's still important because then you can identify what you do need to find. And then you're going to use all this information to identify the problems and concerns regarding your lake. So I just have an example on here. This is one of our lake reports at Lake County. And this is a great resource for finding some information for your lake. And like I said, we do have reports on 173 of our lakes in Lake County. Some may be outdated, I will admit, but there is some data out there at least, and that's a start. And okay, so now you've sifted through all these resources out there. What are you actually going to do with your data? It's important to have some data storage mechanism and making sure it's accessible and available. Identifying your lake issues that are causing your problems. And then also using what's already out there, like the Illinois EPA's integrated report, to identify the impairments that are listed for your lake. Then you can start to see what needs to be improved and where you can start solving the issues and what are the top priorities based on your stakeholder involvement. And these are just some examples of different types of data that you may incorporate. So one thing could be water chemistry. You could have wildlife data. You could have SECI data, that's the water clarity, shoreline erosion surveys, fish surveys, plant surveys, and stakeholder lake user input. And that all is going to go into your lake management plan. So now you're kind of ready. You have all your data. Now you want to develop your vision, your goals, your objectives. And so the vision of your lake, it's going to communicate what your group believes are the ideal conditions for your community. What is your dream? And then your goals, they're going to generate a statement about what the group hopes to accomplish over the long term. Your objectives are going to identify those specific measurable results to aim towards each goal. And then your actions are specific ways the group will reach its objectives. So you're going to break it down. So it's going to start big and then you're going to narrow it down. And it's going to be actionable steps that you can take to reach your goal. And so I know it seems probably pretty daunting. You're going to start with something really big, but then you start breaking it down step by step. And so just kind of an example of what we're talking about with vision, goals, and objectives. I'm going to start with the goals down here. So the goal here, this is actually taken from up in Wisconsin. So this is one of their lake management reports. So their goal was to preserve the quiet nature and safety of Adams, Bear, and Thomas Lake for lake users while allowing for recreational opportunities. And then their objective was to provide recreational opportunities to enjoy Adams, Bear, and Thomas Lakes while minimizing conflicts between users, protecting lake water quality and habitat. So one of their action items, and you'll have many action items for each objective. You could, or you might only have one. It just kind of depends how it plays out. But here, one of their action items was post slow no wake signs at the boat landings on each lake that also lists the state statutes. And so that's like a very specific thing that people can take to reach their objectives and goals here. And we have a bunch of tools on our website that will help you kind of create your water quality goals and your objectives. And so this is an example of it. We have like downloadable templates for you to use to make it hopefully a little less daunting for you. So on the right here is an example of that template. We have it broken down by different topics. So one might be water quality, one might be recreational uses like the example just showed, and then you can write down your objectives, goals, and the actions taken. On the left, we have some questions that might help spark conversation for your goals. So, things like what are the current uses for your lake? What is reasonable given lake potential? Will the action be effective? There's lots of options out there, so you have to see what will be effective. What steps are you going to take this year to work towards your goal? And then what about 2 years? What about 5 years down the road? So, thinking long term, but you're also thinking short term. And then part of the goals and your objectives, you have to evaluate what solutions and alternatives are out there. And there's many management options to choose from. We do have some management option tables available on our website. So once you've narrowed down your problem, you can kind of go to that management option table and see what type of solutions are out there. So for example, on this one, we have aquatic plants as an issue. So if you have too many aquatic plants or you have invasive species, or if you have too few aquatic plants, those could all be problems with your lake. And then it will talk about different options to address that. And once again, you need to assess this based on feasibility for your lake. And that includes things like money, time, lake user needs, and technical feasibility as well. And then it's time for you guys to actually take some action. You're writing your plan, you're creating a timeline, and you're taking steps on those action items that you created. And then you're going to monitor and evaluate. So you're going to develop a mechanism for tracking your activities and monitoring successes and obstacles. Some of this may require collecting data again. So back to that data field, you may have to do some updated water quality surveys, maybe some updated plant ones, community surveys, community input, to see the success of the actions you implemented. And what type of data you're looking for in this evaluation stage depends on what your goal was and what your objectives were. And project documentation is critical. I really can't stress stress that enough. Detailed records of your activities, expenses, time, and labor. This is super important for lake associations and homeowner groups because you have presidents that switch over, right, every couple years. You'll have a whole new board. People will move, and sometimes then you'll start over from scratch. When really you have all this past history, but maybe it wasn't organized or put in an area where people are available to it. So project documentation is a really critical component. And we've seen a lot of problems with that with groups we work with. And as I mentioned before, then you can reassess and modify. So did that work? The lake changes over time and your needs may change over time. And as well as management options, they change over time too. We're always finding new solutions out there. So you can always reevaluate what is available or try new solutions. As I mentioned, we have a couple of resources available. These are all found on the Lake County Health Department website. We have an overview guide for lake management planning. We have the option tables. We have goal worksheets and examples. We actually have a template for a lake management plan. So it's a Word document you would download and then you would fill in the items for your specific lake. So if you don't even know where to start, we have some stuff that would hopefully help guide you. It's still going to take some work and effort and a lot of meetings for your lake to create this document, but we want to try to give you the resources to be able to do it. I'm going to briefly switch topics a little bit now, and I'm just going to touch on some citizen science opportunities that are currently available and ones that are coming up, because I know that's of interest to a lot of people here. So one of the citizen science projects we have going on in Lake County is called the Lake Observation by Citizen Scientists and Satellites. So these are lake level gauges that are at some lakes in Lake County. There were criteria for which lakes could have this. This is a NASA funded project, and we coordinated with, it was the University of North Carolina who's conducting this, and they actually have these gauges all over the world, which is pretty cool to think about. They have them in the French Alps, they have them in Illinois, so we're part of something much bigger here. So what they're doing is they're using lake height data submitted by citizen scientists, and then they're also looking at the lake surface area from when satellites are going overhead, and they're trying to monitor the volume of water in lakes globally. So it's part of a bigger project, but I know it's very useful on an individual lake basis. People are very concerned about their water levels, and especially with some of the drought years we've been having, this has been really useful data. So this is one opportunity. There are a number that are in Lake County forest preserves. So that's why I'm putting this out there, because if you see this on one of the lakes when you're doing one of the trails, please submit some data. There's a sign on there and it's super easy. You just text the lake level data and it will have all the information on the sign of what number you text it to. And then that data is logged and it will get used in all these analyses. And if you go to their website, it's the LOCSS, Lake Observation by Citizen Scientists. You can see which lakes have it. Something that will be coming up this year is a Citizen BioBlitz Day, and this is going to be focused on aquatic invasive species. So the goal is other states do similar item to this, like Wisconsin and Minnesota, and it's getting people out on a specific day, specific week on our lake, really looking for aquatic invasive species and then reporting it back. And it'll be reporting it back to the health department. So we can really get as many eyes as we can on our waters, really see what's out there. Like I said, we have over 200 lakes in Lake County, and when we're doing our summer monitoring, we're maybe doing 8 to 12 a summer. So we only have eyes on a few, and really rely on people who live and recreate on the lakes to report any suspicious things they see. So this is going to be something that's coming up. We don't have a date set yet, but we should be getting it set soon, and then I can relay it to you guys. And then I briefly just wanted to mention an upcoming event. So that's the Illinois Lakes Management Association Conference. That's coming up March 4th through 6th. And this year it is in Central Illinois, so it'll be in Champaign. But it's a really good resource for places. We have a bunch of government agencies, consultants, homeowners, lake association groups all gather and kind of talk about different topics that are going on with lake management issues. So just a little blurb for that. I am president of Illinois Lakes Management Association. So just putting out a little word for that. And that's all I have for this right now. I wanted to keep it short and kind of big scale, and then I'm willing to take any questions for the remainder of time that you allow. And then I have on here just a reminder of some of the role for Lake County. We have resource reviewer, technical advisor, monitors, and then concerns, you can report them to the health department. So we are here as a public service as well. And so we will address any, concerns or complaints that are provided to us. We will go out and investigate.
Bill, how would you like to inspire questions? I've got one to kick us off if you'd like me to start.
Looks like there may be, oh no. I was checking the chat, but
Yeah.
thanks, Mary, for dropping the links.
Yeah.
Yeah, highly recommend the ILMA conference if you haven't been. And it's just a great place to network with lakes people, meet technical experts, including dog fetchers or dog chasers of geese. Beautiful dogs on exhibit there.
Hey, Alana, Jim Heinen, quick question for you. How do you decide what lakes you're going to monitor across the summer? Like you said, I realize it's a question of resources. How do you go about deciding that?
Yeah. So yeah, we typically try to do lakes within the same watershed when we do pick lakes to do, and we kind of just do it on a rotational basis now. So if we did, the Bull Creek watershed one year, and now it's kind of due again. There are some cases where we can bump lakes up sooner in the process, and some of that stuff may be dependent on watershed plans that are going on. So like Lake County Stormwater Management will do updated watershed-based plans. And so if they need some data for that, we might, move into a different watershed at that time. But yeah, we typically try to stay within watersheds, and that's how we've been doing it. And then also seeing how long it's been since the last time. Unfortunately, now it's ranging on 10 years from when we can get back to a lake. So it really is a snapshot in time. Just for reference, our group is myself and 2 other people. We're a very small group, 3 people. So we are limited on resources. We do get 2 interns in the summer, but yeah, there's just a lot of lakes in Lake County and only a small number of us. So it's ranging on 10 years, and we base it off of watersheds.
So a follow up to that. So when you find a lake that is in need of improvement, we'll stop there for a second for a variety of reasons. Does a lake ever stay in the like maybe it's every other year, every 3 years of monitoring just to see how it's improving?
So we have done, there was a time period where we had a Sentinel Lake study. And what that was is we had a set of lakes that we monitored 10 years straight in a row. So every year for 10 years. And the goal was to track changes over time. Like, did we see changes from year 1 to year 10 and what the differences was? Surprisingly, a lot of the parameters that we analyzed, we did not see many changes in that time period. So that was kind of a test for like what our next monitoring would be. So, that kind of showed that we didn't need to do every year with our resources, what would be possible, what would make the most effort. There are some times where lakes may get incorporated with more monitoring, and that could be on if it has like a grant associated with it. Sometimes we'll have to do some extra monitoring with that, and that may bump it up.
Okay, it's helpful. Thank you. Last
Yep.
question for me is service organizations like Scouts, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
Do they ever get involved with the association on a regular basis on monitoring lakes? Are there any of those things happening across Lake County?
Yeah, so we don't have too much with like Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. We have worked with high schools, and some of the environmental science clubs there who, specifically Libertyville, they live right on a lake. So that's been a great collaboration. In the past, so the volunteer lake monitoring program, that was an Illinois EPA funded program. We did have some students that would take monitoring measurements through that. That was disfunded in 2019. So there's no longer as strong of a network there. But there hasn't been a big tap in the like Boy Scout, Cub Scout group.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time.
It doesn't mean that they wouldn't be useful. So that is something, if you have ideas, I'm willing to hear them and we can chat too.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yep. Mhm.
Alana, it's Becky. So I heard you say there's greater than 200 lakes in Lake County. You have some type of information, even if it's old, on 173. And if I just do 200 lakes and you do 8 lakes a year, and there's more than 200, it's going to take you 25 years to get to all those lakes, which is kind of a surprising piece of information to me, right? Throughout your presentation, I heard a lot about even when you're stretched really thin, it takes a long time, you only can do 8 a year. You've gathered a lot of information. What do you do with it? How
Yeah.
does that information open the doors to action? And can you share maybe 2 stories, maybe a success story of how the monitoring led to improvement, and perhaps a story of where, for whatever reason, the monitoring hasn't yet led to improvement?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, we write lake reports based off all our monitoring data. Included in those lake reports are recommendations kind of specific to those lakes. And then what we do after we write a lake report is, so the lake report writing is usually in the winter. So coming out of winter, spring, that's when we're going to start having meetings with those associations for those lakes. And we recap all the data we collected. We recap the recommendations. And then a lot of the solutions to it and how successful it is really depends on the homeowner associations and the lake associations who have the management capability. So Lake County doesn't own any lakes. We don't have any management regulatory capacity on it. It really is based off of people who own lake bottom. And so sometimes that could be, over 100 people on a lake who own lake bottom. And some associations are really well put together and they have a great volunteer or homeowner board that will be able to implement solutions. So a lot of the success depends on the capacity of these groups to be able to actually take effort on it. And then some success stories. So it's varied. We have had, trying to think of some specific ones. So I know, well, we've been working really closely with the Forest Preserve District. They own a number of lakes in Lake County, and we do the same thing for them. When we write lake reports, we'll meet with them, and then we will go over the different recommendations available. So they've been doing some carp removal on their lakes, as well as aquatic plant restoration, and that's been clearing up a lot of the issues on one specific lake, Slough Lake, but as well as McDonald's and Hastings. So those are kind of in the northern part of the county. We've been seeing some success there, and those were specific items in our recommendations on our lake management plan. I know there's a number more, and there's probably people on this call who have taken some of the actions that we've done. Sometimes we always don't know what actions actually have been taken from our lake management reports. It also depends how willing the association or homeowners would be to update us on it from years later. Sometimes we're going out to lakes for a bunch of meetings. Sometimes we'll do one meeting on our lake report and then we don't hear from them until 10 years later when we're back out there.
And well, just ask one more follow-up, then I'll give others the floor. How many lakes in Lake County of the 200 plus? First of all, do we know how many lakes there are?
Yeah, we do have that number. So it's hard because like the definition of a lake can also change. So it depends on like what we're trying to call, like if you're looking at Illinois EPA's guidelines, especially for impairment status, they're looking at lakes over 20 acres, which is pretty big for the impairment status. We're typically looking at like 5 acres or more. So it can vary on what you're defining as a lake, and that's why that number kind of changes, but we have the capability with our mapping to come up with an exact number, but it depends on what you're defining as a lake in
So
terms of
let's say it was
acreage.
5 acres or more. What would you say are the number of lakes in Lake County?
I would have to look, but it would probably be just over 200. I think our 200 number is based off the 5 acres.
Perfect. Okay, and then out of that 200, how many have homeowners associations?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not sure. So that's something that could potentially be looked at. A lot don't have formal associations. So the association level will vary. So some have like voluntary due structures. Some have mandatory due structures. Some don't have an association at all. And I'm not sure what that number is. I mean, we know, we have some that are very active and we talk to a lot or will reach out to us for technical resources. And every time we're on our lake, we at least have some homeowners that we talk with, but sometimes they won't have a full association. And I don't know if we know the expanse of it, if we know how many have like a good network of
So it sounds
homeowner
like you have at least
associations.
one contact, one homeowner for every one of these 200 lakes.
Yeah, so we have to get permission to monitor any lake if we go through someone's like to get access to a lake. So a lot of lakes are private, and we need permission to access. If we don't have it, we can't monitor that lake. So yeah, we have at
Thanks
least
for-
one contact.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
I think Lisa has her hand up.
I do. I just want to make mention of how far-reaching the data that you guys collect. You had mentioned, Alana, you don't always know, how are people using that data, and not only. So I work for a company called ILM Environments. We do like management plans. Almost inevitably, if the lakes in Lake County, we're incorporating the data that you collect for certain, supplementing it with, maybe more recent data if necessary. But even, for instance, we're working with Diamond Lake in Mundelein, and I was on a call with them today and putting together a PowerPoint for their constituents. And our recommendations are really based on the data that came out of your lake management report that you pulled together. So I guess I just wanted to affirm the fact that others are using your data in a very healthy way to move forward with improving our lakes in Lake County.
And I'll mention that there are some other entities that are doing monitoring as well. So like Illinois EPA does do monitoring on the lakes in Illinois. Similar to us, they have all the lakes in the state to do, and they're rotating through there. So every year, I said we're doing like between 8 and 12. Typically, they'll have like one up in Lake County during their rotation because they're doing it all across the state. So they'll have some updated data as well. And then of course, all the consultants, they're typically doing their lake monitoring for specific projects on lakes.
And Alana, let me jump in. Does all that data then go into one holding place, or could it be spread in disparate places and no one
Yeah.
can see someone else's stuff?
Yeah, it could definitely be spread in different areas. So all the like state data is typically going into the state database. So that's the Illinois EPA's one in the STORET database. So you can look in there. And then, but if individuals are doing it, like if each lake sometimes hires specific consultants, that data is not necessarily getting reported. And the lake associations may just have that data. So that's one thing to consider. And this would also incorporate things like fish surveys. So that might be the Department of Natural Resources. So you may have to look in a number of different areas to find resources out there.
I have a question, may I? Alana, I know Loon Lake had a great success story with invasive weeds, and they had a combined effort of orchestrating training and education while they were also doing the invasive weed treatment and educating people throughout the community. Can you comment on the success factors that you see for those who really see incredible progress on their lakes?
Yeah.
The three things they do really well.
Yeah, Loon Lakes has had some really good success. Once again, they have a really good network to work with. So they have a really good homeowner association. They are actually one of the only areas that have a special service area. So they actually tax themselves and have money set aside for lake management. So they are able to do some bigger projects than some other lakes may be able to do. So having a really active, engaged homeowner association is crucial. Having some funds available is also a big component in what can be possible. The success story you're talking about is they have a pretty big Eurasian water milfoil problem, and they did do some treatment last year on that, and it was pretty successful. That's only year one. We'll be out monitoring the next couple of years on the aquatic plant survey to see how it is, but they were also able to apply for some grants. And that was a lot of them were for stormwater, Lake County stormwater management. So I recommend if you're looking for grant opportunities, definitely check out Lake County stormwater management, as well as Section 319 funding. So I mentioned impairment statuses. Usually we don't like to be impaired, but one benefit of it is that you can qualify for some more funding based off impairment statuses. So another key to success for some of these lakes is tapping into resources and networks. So they're actively talking to us a lot. We're kind of guiding them in the right direction of if they have questions, if we can't answer it, who might be able to ask it, what resources are out there. So, I mean, those are some of the key components.
That's great. Yeah, money makes a big difference. I
Yeah,
think
unfortunately, yeah.
a steady crew of volunteers, as Jim Heinen does, if he's still on here. Maybe Jim, you could speak to that. How did you orchestrate the people taking action so you saw the collective effort? And he may be on mute.
Mary, sorry about that.
Okay.
No, yeah, what Mary is speaking to is some shoreline restoration work that we are continuing to work through. And each fall semester in the beginning, we strive for a community service day, and we get 130, 140 students that will come and work on a project. And they'll start at 9 o'clock in the morning and go till 3 in the afternoon. And this year we're going after 1,000 linear feet of shoreline, and we accomplished about 750, about 2 feet out, 2 feet down in an area that we were having really heavy erosion because of where it was at on the lake. So we'll continue to work on that. My employees across campus have a desire to do it, and we've got another 500 students that we're going to, petition this spring to get involved. So, there's a lot of interest in the environment right now. And it's not everybody's thing, but there's an awful lot.
Yeah, very true. Great work, Jim. Thanks.
Hey, Alana, it's Stacy. What do you know what the status is of the EPA Bloom Watch this year?
Yeah. So, yep, they're still active.
Okay.
And so they are going to be giving an update at ILMA. So I will get the newest data in a couple weeks for you on what the status is. But I know they have had they were able to create a dashboard for it. I'm not sure if you knew of that update from last year. So there's going to be an interactive dashboard for Illinois based off of blooms. So anytime people are submitting Bloom Watch data, so anyone can do that. So this is another citizen science effort. If you're seeing an algae bloom on your lake, you can submit that bloom, like a photo, location, to Illinois EPA. It will get mapped on a dashboard, and then that data will live there. So if you're interested in a lake, you can kind of see some history on that. So that was they got a grant to create that dashboard, which is good. They're also going to still be taking samples this year. So I know Lake County, we take a bunch of samples for algae blooms. We have some routine ones, and then we'll do response based. So if you guys are seeing algae blooms on your lake, you can call the health department, and then we can come out and collect a sample, and we coordinate with EPA on the analysis.
So that's the other part of my question. We ended up purchasing some of the test strips.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is we're really not quite comfortable using them yet because we're reading the directions off of a package,
Yeah.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
Once we get the hang of it, what do they really play a role in reporting it all?
The test strips or
Yeah.
yeah, they do. So we have another lake that does that. They take weekly test strips, whether they see a bloom or not. And then
Ah.
what ends up happening is they'll call us when they see results over like 10. It depends on which test strips you have. So if they see it above 10, they'll give us a call, and then we go physically collect a sample and we'll send it to the state to get analysis. So yeah, it has been a good resource, and we have some lakes that are doing that, and then they use it as a reference mark of when to call us to kind of do some further.
Yeah, and that, of course, I mean, we're calling you every day. So that's kind of what we purchased them for, and
Yep.
we didn't end up using them much. And then I wasn't quite sure, and you just answered that test, if you see it, then call you guys, right?
Yes. Yeah, that would be
Okay.
great. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Perfect.
And then you guys can use that to, for quicker access to putting up your signs at your beaches and things like that. If you get a hit, then you can kind of implement that. Mm-hmm.
And that we got stuck there too.
Yep.
You know, and we always get stuck on that. Like, well, when do you notify the public?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's got a different opinion on it.
Yeah, so what we base it off of is there are recreational guidelines for microcystin toxin, which is primarily the main toxin in our blooms. And that level is 8 micrograms per liter. Of course, some of the testing, like I said 10, because that testing is 10's kind of the metric for it. So it's a little slightly different. The World Health Organization used to have 10 as a metric. I think they still do, but then states, Illinois and the US came out with 8 based off their research. So if it's above 8, that's when we call you guys too. So if it's below 8, we're not necessarily calling you guys to say, put up signs, but if it's above 8, we will notify the beach manager and say, hey, you got a bloom going on. You need to put up a sign.
The other piece to that, again, that there seem to be multiple opinions on, you tested at one spot and, do you close all the beaches or do you just close what's around there?
Yeah, so we have done like some testing of this where we'll take samples within the bloom itself and then samples a few feet out in the more clear water. And generally we're seeing the higher numbers in the scum area, like the visible bloom area.
Okay.
Of course, that is not 100% the case. So you might still have higher numbers in clear water, but in general, you're seeing the higher numbers when you see a visible bloom. So if you do test and you have a visible bloom on your beach, and then you have another visible bloom on one of your other beaches, because you guys have a bunch of beaches, likely that's the same concentration. It's the same species that's there because it's all the same lake. So you'd probably want to close that bloom, but people are still recreating in the center of the lake typically where it's clearer. And so yeah, there's rarely where they close the whole lake for an algae bloom. They're typically closing the beach areas.
Okay, so it is okay if people want to be brave and go swim in the middle, right?
And it depends on, we would say when in doubt, we say when in doubt, stay out. If it looks bad, they probably don't want to do that.
You'd be surprised.
I know trust me, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Good. You really clarified that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are just about ready to wrap up our conversation. Alana, thank you so much for the presentation. Certainly, I think all of us have really learned a lot. In fact, what I'd like to do is ask anybody who is still on board here to give me your takeaway in the chat box and let us know what you think of your lake and if there's anything that you would like to see us do on it. So what's your takeaway from tonight's presentation? Put that in the chat box if you can. We'd really appreciate that. So I'm going to hand it back to Mary and we'll conclude our presentation. Again, Alana, thanks a lot. It was a great one tonight.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks.